Hey everybody, I'm back with another video on consulting. I think the most common question that people have when they start consulting is how much to charge? How much money can I charge when I'm doing something as a contractor versus as an employee? And fortunately, there's a very simple rule of thumb that people use to figure this out. And that is to just divide your salary by 1,000. So for example, if you're doing some job and you're making $50,000 a year as a salary, then you could conceivably make $50 an hour doing it as a contractor. Or if you're making $75,000 a year via salary, then you might make $75 an hour as a contractor. If you do the math on this, there's 2,000 working hours in a year. So that actually comes out to be making double the amount that you are making salary. So if you were to actually work 40 hours a week and 50 weeks a year at that same rate, you would double your income. So why is it double? Why the discrepancy? Well, as I talked about in one of my other videos, when you're a contractor, you have other overhead that you don't have to worry about as a full-time employee. So you may be paying, for one, you're paying your own taxes, certainly, but you may be paying for your own health insurance. You may have other overhead involved in running your contracting business, like your equipment, your computer, doing sales and outreach. But primarily because contract jobs don't necessarily go, day to day, week to week, and fill the entire year. So you have to worry about the fact that you're not necessarily working 40 hours a day, 50 weeks a year. Now, once you have that number in mind, again, let's just use $50 an hour as an example. That number is really just a starting point. I would just use that as kind of one starting point, and depending on the client and depending on your fitness for the project, you may be able to ask for more or less. So let's talk about those two aspects really quickly. There are a lot of aspects that could enter into, how you finally arrive at a rate that you and your client can be happy with. But I'll just talk about two. The first one I'll talk about is the client budget. So it's perfectly reasonable to ask your client, what is your budget for this project, or to try and put it in, in a very nice, non-provocative way, just to say, can you give me a ballpark of what your budget is for this project? And they typically will have some number in mind. If they've reached the point where they're talking to potential service providers, then they probably have gotten the green light to spend a certain amount of money. Now, probably not all that money is going to go to one contractor or one service provider, but if they are going to give you a figure, it should give you a rough idea of how much they think that they should be able to spend for this project, what is merited. And then your job as a contractor is to go back to your desk and think about what's your portion of that going to be, and how many hours will you need to spend, and what will be a reasonable amount for you to be paid out of that total budget. The other thing that you can think about is fitness. So your fitness for a particular job is how well you fit for that. So one way to think about it is, if I imagine my network, all of my friends, all my professional colleagues, could I imagine someone else doing this job? Or how many other people could I imagine doing this job? So, I'm a software engineer, so if I could imagine, oh, this is they're just building a simple web application. It's got some forms, and that's pretty much it. This is a pretty common skill. So that would lower the rate, because there's a bigger pool of people that could do this job. However, if we're talking about the work, and as they describe it, it sounds very uniquely suited to me, and I try to imagine my network, and I can't think of a single other person that could do this because I have a unique set of skills, well, then the fitness for me is very high, and the ability for them to find another contractor that can do all these things is very low. Then it's more of a specialty, And so then that will increase my rate. And in some cases, it could increase it quite a bit. So those are just a couple things to think about. Again, rule of thumb is divide your salary by 1,000 to get a starting point for your hourly rate. Think about and ask about the client budget, and think about your fitness. How fit are you for this particular project? And that will help you close in on a particular rate.